All right, subtracting decimals is our next lesson. Subtracting and adding decimals are, for the most part, pretty similar. The biggest thing to remember with subtracting, though, is you have to borrow, most likely. So you have to borrow when you're subtracting. Sometimes you won't have to, but we're going to have multiple examples on here to give us some good practice of that borrowing so we can do it. Okay, so flip open to your notes booklet, Decimal Operations Notes booklet, and turn to the third page, which is the Subtracting Decimals tab. When we are subtracting decimals, again, we have to make sure we line up our decimal points vertically. And I will start working on that step of this problem down here. So that means my decimal point is in between my 2 and my 3 in this number, between my 9 and my 1 in this number. So let's do 42.36. And now I know that my 9 has to be right underneath my 2, 9.184. So again, we have almost like our little grid that we could draw in between each letter. And each letter would have something that lines up directly underneath it. Okay, so we lined up our decimal points vertically. Step 1 is done. Then we are going to add zeros to fill in empty places. Now that means we have 2 zeros we need to fill in this spot here. I'm going to grab another color so you can see where we need to add the zeros in. Our first 0 is going to go under our 4, right next to our 9. I know that's not the way we write the number 9, but we're going to need to use that 0 when we are subtracting. So we're going to add it in, and then our other spot we're going to add in our 0 is right above the 4 at the end of the first number here. Okay? All right, then the next step is to subtract. Now that we have it all set up, we are ready to subtract. So I'm going to put in my subtract sign there, fill in my line, and here's where our borrowing comes in. Looks like we might have to do quite a bit of it in this problem. So I know that I always start on the left side, the farthest number on, the right side, farthest number on the right side here. When I'm starting to subtract, I look at this and go 0 minus 4. I can't do that. So I'm going to have to borrow from this number here. Well, if you look at this number, you know that you can't borrow any from this because 6 minus 8 can't even work. So let's go to the 3. We can borrow from this column here because I know that 3 minus 1 works. So let's do this. When we borrow, remember we're taking a 10 out. So 2 becomes this. We'll add our 10 onto 6. We end up having 2 minus 1 and 16 minus 8. But we need to borrow this guy again to bring it over to the 0 and the 4. So now this is going to become 15 minus 8, and this will become 10. All right, we can subtract. 10 minus 4 is 6. 15 minus 8 is 7. 2 minus 1 is 1. And now I'm going to bring my decimal point straight down. Make sure you do that. If you need to add in your arrow, I saw some of you when you were doing your adding problems were adding in that arrow. That's great to see. Okay, so now we get to 2 minus 9. But wait, we can't do that. So that means we have to borrow from our 4 over here. Now it looks like we have plenty to borrow from 4 because it's only getting 0 subtracted from it. So let's make that into a 3 and turn our 2 into a 12. Now we can subtract. 12 minus 9 gives us 3. 3 minus 0 gives us 3. And our answer is 33.176. Now, let's say that you got done with your problem and you maybe didn't add right, subtract right, or maybe you didn't borrow correctly, or maybe your decimal point didn't get brought down in the same or in the right place. What I want you to do after solving each problem, I want you to just kind of round this number to the nearest whole number. Okay? In this case, 33.176. I know because this is a 1. I'm just going to round this to the whole number of 33. Okay, that's pretty close to 33. So let's kind of keep that in the back of our mind. If I were rounding these two numbers in the original problem up here, I know that this is pretty close to 42, and this is pretty close to 9. Well, I know that 42 minus 9 should be around 33. So then I'm going to take a double look at my answer. my answer is close to 33. That means that I've solved the problem correctly. My decimal point's in the right spot. Now, if my decimal point ended up being in between the two threes here, and I got 3.3176 as my answer, I think something would be up. If I know that my answer should be around 33, and I got 3.3 as my answer, might be a great way to double check your answer too, to make sure that your answer makes sense, your decimal point is in the right spot, and then that's an easy fix to go back and quickly do before you are done with the problem. Okay, then the last part of our notes up here, I kind of skipped over, bring down the decimal into your answer. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple problems that you're going to put on the back of this page that have borrowing in different spots. So the first problem I'm going to write is 14.8 minus 9.45. Right away, I notice that I only have one digit after my decimal point in this first number, and I have two after my decimal point in this number. So I know I'm probably going to have to add some zeros in, which means I'm probably going to have to borrow. So our first step is to line up our decimal points vertically. So 14.8 minus, and I know my decimal point's here, so that means my 9 needs to go under my 4, my 4 needs to go under my 8, and 5 goes here. Okay, fill in zeros where they need to. If you need to do it in another color, you're more than welcome to. If you don't want to, you don't have to either. All right, so now I notice when I'm starting to subtract, 0 can't be subtracted from 5, so I'm going to borrow from here. 8 becomes 7. Then I bring that 10 over to my 0, and that becomes 10. So now I do 10 minus 5 gives me 5. 7 minus 4 gives me 3. Bring down my decimal point. 4 minus 9, I can't do. So I'm going to borrow from the 1. This becomes a 0, and my 4 becomes a 14. Now I can subtract. 14 minus 9 gives me 5. 0 minus 0 gives me 0. I don't need to add in that 0 for my answer. If you really wanted to, you're more than welcome to if that helps you to keep the place. But I know that when we're writing our answer, we don't actually need that 0 in front of the 5. Okay, so now 5.35 is my answer. Let's go back and just double check our answers and just see if our answer makes sense. So I know that this is pretty close to, you could even say 14 or 15, either way. Okay, let's round it up to 15 because technically that is what it's rounded. Now 9.45 is pretty close to 9 if we round it. So 15 minus 9 would be 6 is our answer. Okay, now I realize that our answer is a lot less than 6 in this case, but that's because we rounded up with this number. If we rounded that down, it would be 14, and we do 14 minus 9, our answer would be 5 right here. Is our answer pretty close to 6 or 5? Yes. So that means our decimal point was brought down to the right spot. Now, if we got 53.5 and it was put here, we would know, okay, 15 minus 9 is not 53. Something's wrong with my answer. Okay, great way to double check your answer. All right, another problem I'd like you to copy down is 16 minus 1.45. All right, so our first step is to line up our decimal points vertically. But you notice that our first number in our problem doesn't have a decimal point given to us. So we need to add it in. And it always helps me to add it in up here before I rewrite the problem down below so that I know exactly where my decimal points need to line up. So because this is the whole number of 16, it's not 1.6, it's not 0.16, it is 16. My decimal point needs to go after the 6. Okay, so now I can line up my numbers with the decimal points lining up vertically. 16 points, I'm going to put that there for now. Now my decimal point for my next number goes right underneath the first decimal point. I know 1 goes here, and 4 and 5 go here. Okay, let's add in our zeros where we need to. So I know I need to put 1 underneath here, and I need to add 1 on top of the 4 and 1 on top of the 5. All right, we can start subtracting. 0 minus 5, can't do. 0 minus 4, can't do. 6 minus 1, we can definitely do that, so let's borrow. This becomes a 5, This becomes a 10. But now we need to borrow over here. So we're going to cross that out. And that becomes a 9. Bring our 10 over here, and that becomes a 10. Now we can subtract. 10 minus 5 is 5. 9 minus 4 is 5. Bring down my decimal point. 5 minus 1 is 4. 1 minus 0 is 1. My answer is 14.55. Okay, now let's double check. Let's estimate our answers and our numbers in the original problem and make sure that our answer's right around where it needs to be. So we know that this is 16 and this is right around 1. Okay, you can even round up to 2 if you wanted to. 16 minus 1, I know should be around 15. Now if my answer is right around 15, which it is, we have our decimal point in the correct spot. If my decimal point was between the 1 and the 4 or in between the 5s, if I got 1.455 or 145.5, I know that something would be up with my answer or my decimal point. Okay, one more problem I'd like you to copy down in the back. These are all kinds of different subtraction decimal problems that you may see, and I'd like you to have all these examples so you know exactly how to solve it. All right, next one is 44.07 minus 1.2. Let's line up our decimal points vertically. So I have 44.07 minus 1.2. All right, fill in our zeros. I know 1 goes underneath the 7, 1 goes underneath my 4, and I can start subtracting. 7 minus 0 gives me 7. 0 minus 2, can't do. Let's borrow from the 4, becomes a 3. Bring that 10 over here. 10 minus 2 becomes 8. Bring down my decimal point. 3 minus 1 is 2. 4 minus 0 is 4. My answer should be 42.87. Now let's look. I'm going to round this to 44. It's pretty close to that. And this second number here, 1.2, I'm going to round to 1. Now 44 minus 1 should give me 43 as my answer. Double check and look to see, yep, my answer is pretty close to 43. I know that my answer and my decimal point's in the right spot. My answer should be pretty accurate. All right, now that you have those examples written down in your books, I'm going to have you do the got it problems. If you want to flip open to page 179. At the bottom of 179, you have, I'm going to flip my camera sideways here for a second just so it can reach the bottom of the book. You have the got it problems down at the bottom here that you are solving. Okay, page 179, the bottom of it. I will have you pause this video right now, solve the problems on your own, and then when you have all 3 problems solved and your answers written on the side for D, E, and F over here, you may continue the video and check your answers. All right, let's look at our problems here. Put my camera back so you can see. Get situated so I can show you the problems. All right, so let's solve letter D. Letter D, sorry with all this other stuff in the way here. Letter D, 9.543 minus 3.671. Line up our decimal points vertically. 9.543 minus 3.671. Guess what? I have no zeros I need to fill in, so I can start subtracting right away. 3 minus 1 gives me 2. 4 minus 7, can't do. 5 minus 6, can't do. 9 minus 3, let's borrow. That becomes an 8. Bring that 10 over to the 5. That becomes a 15, but we still need to borrow one more time, so that becomes a 14. And then we bring that extra 10 over to the 4. That also becomes a 14. My new problems become 14 minus 7 gives me 7. 14 minus 6 gives me 8. Bring my decimal point down. 8 minus 3 gives me 5. Letter D should be 5.872 as my answer. I'm going to write it over on the side for D. All right, maybe I'll keep the camera as this is right here so you can see my next problem. I'm going to solve letter E. Letter E. I'm going to add in my dollar signs in front of my numbers here just because this is dealing with money. 50.62 minus 39.81. All right, 2 minus 1, I can do. That is 1 is my answer. 6 minus 8, can't do. 0 minus 9, can't do. 5 minus 3, let's borrow. That becomes a 4. This now becomes a 10. Cross that out, becomes a 9. Bring that 10 over to the 6, and now I have 16 minus 8. 16 minus 8 gives me 8. Bring my decimal point down. 9 minus 9 gives me 0. 4 minus 3 gives me 1. My answer is 10.81. Now, if you were to estimate this one, I didn't do that with the other one, so I'll go back and do letter D after I do letter E, estimating. I know that this first number here is right around 50, and the second number in the problem is right around 40. So if I were to just roughly guess this and do 50 minus 40, my answer should be around 10. And look at, my answer is right around 10, so my decimal point is in the right spot. Now, letter D. Letter D, let's say that 9.5 is right closer to 10, because if you were to round 9.5, you would get 10. Okay, so we have 10 minus 3.6 would be 4. So I know roughly 10 minus 4 should be 6. My answer with 5.872 is pretty close to 6. So I know that my decimal point was in the right spot for that. Okay, all right, let's solve the last problem here. Okay, one of those whole number problems again. So I know that my decimal point, because this is 14, it's not 1.4, it's not 0.14. My decimal point needs to be after my 4. Okay, let's add it in. 14 point, and that's all I'm going to do for right now, minus 9.09. Fill in my zeros. I'll still use my other color. All right. Oh, I forgot one right underneath my 1. Now I know that I'm probably going to have to do a lot of borrowing in this problem here. 0 minus 9, can't do. 0 minus 0, can do, but we can't borrow from it. 4 minus 9, still can't do. 1 minus 0, finally. Change that to a 0. Bring your 10 over to your 4. Cross that out. That becomes a 13. Bring the 10 over to the 0. Cross that out. That becomes a 9. Bring your 10 over to your 0, and now you have 10. Let's subtract. 10 minus 9 is 1. 9 minus 0 is 9. Bring my decimal point down. 13 minus 9 is 4. And 0 minus 0 is 0. But I don't need to write in my answer for that, so I know that my answer is done. 4.91 should be my answer. Let's double check with our estimating. So obviously this is right around 14. Minus 9.09 is right around 9. Okay, when you do 14 minus 9, you should get 5 as your answer. Now 4.91, isn't that awfully close to 5? It is. So we know that our decimal point's in the right spot. Okay, now your homework for tonight is, if you flip over to the next page, page 181, you have already done problems 1, 2, and 3 at the top. Okay, these were already done before. Now you are going to do problems 4, 5, and 6, page 181, and this will be rewritten on the assignment tab or underneath the assignment on Google Classroom, so you can double check there also. Page 181, 4, 5, and 6. Then you're going to do the next page, page 183, and you are going to do numbers 20, 21, and 22. So you have 6 problems that you're doing, 4, 5, and 6, 20, 21, and 22. Let me know if you have any questions, and if you want extra practice, you need extra practice, I will reattach that same worksheet that was attached for the adding decimals lesson. That the second half of that sheet is all subtracting decimals problems. So if you want, you can just choose one problem to do extra on there. You can do 5 extra problems if you think you need 5 extra problems worth of extra practice. Totally up to you. You don't even have to touch that sheet if you don't want, but that extra practice is available to you as well. Good luck. Let me know if you have any questions.